I now come to the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee. The Monetary Policy Committee met on 6th, 7th, and briefly today in the morning of April to deliberate and decide on the policy repo rate. After a detailed assessment of the evolving macroeconomic and financial developments and the outlook, the MPC voted unanimously to keep the policy repo rate unchanged under the liquidity facility at 5.25%. Consequently, the STF rate remains at 5% and the MSF rate and the bank rate at 5.5%. The MPC also decided to continue with the neutral stance. I shall now briefly state the rationale for these decisions of the MPC. The MPC noted that since the last policy meeting, geopolitical uncertainties have heightened significantly. Headline inflation remains contained and below the target. However, upside risks to the inflation outlook driven by increased energy prices, pressures, and probable weather disturbances affecting food prices have increased. Core inflation pressures remain muted, although supply chain dislocations and the risk of second-round effects render the future inflation trajectory uncertain. The MPC further noted that high-frequency indicators till February of this year suggest the continuation of strong momentum in economic activity. Growth impulses continue to be supported by robust private consumption and investment demand. However, the West Asia conflict is likely to impede this growth. Higher input costs associated with increase in energy prices and international freight and insurance costs, along with supply chain disruptions that could constrain availability of key inputs for downstream sectors, would impair growth. The government has taken several measures targeted at supporting exports and protecting supply chains. This should mitigate the adverse impact of the conflict. The MPC opined that the intensity and the duration of the conflict, as well as the resultant damage to the energy and other infrastructure, add risk to the inflation and growth outlooks. However, the fundamentals of the Indian economy are on a stronger footing, providing it with greater resilience to withstand shocks now than in the past. It also noted that the economy is confronted with a supply shock. It felt, therefore, prudent to wait and watch the changing circumstances and the evolving growth inflation outlook. Accordingly, the MPC voted to keep the policy repo rate unchanged, even as it remains vigilant, closely monitoring incoming information and assessing the balance of risks. The MPC also decided to continue with the neutral stance, retaining the flexibility to respond judiciously to incoming information.